Hi, everyone. Dr. Mary with 4 Points Family Chiropractic. Welcome to our Facebook Live on chronic inflammation or inflammation generally. We're going to end up talking more about chronic inflammation. So it's basically just kind of a brief overview. Inflammation is your body's defense mechanism, and it's important, and it's not always bad. We're going to be talking more about the bad kind, but just to kind of conceptualize it for you, it's how we as humans adapted to things that could kill us. So things like pathogens, traumas, toxins from our environment. It's an integral part of the immune system, and it's when the body senses a threat, and it brings things like cytokines, white blood cells, all of that, inflammatory chemicals, swelling to protect the area, increase blood flow, all to facilitate waste removal from the tissue. So that's what it's doing. And there's two different types. Acute is what should happen. That's good. So you have a cut and it swells up, it scabs over, the body brings white blood cells to the area, it heals the damaged cells, takes the damaged material out through the lymph system, through the liver, through the gut, out of your body. That's perfect. That's what should happen. Maybe you have a cold or a viral infection, so your body makes the tissues in your nasal passages inflamed and does the same thing. It brings everything out of the body that's toxic. What we're going to be talking more about today is chronic inflammation. So that is widespread, it's long lasting, and it's prolific. It impacts your entire body. It also, unfortunately, is harder to notice. It's a harder thing to catch, and you have to really be paying attention to the signs for it to know whether or not you have it. Broad low-level inflammation is really the cause of almost all chronic issues or chronic illness. So things like Alzheimer's is brain inflammation, chronic brain inflammation, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, IBS. All of those are inflammatory conditions that have just been there for long, long periods of time until your body couldn't handle it anymore and it became a more chronic issue. Chronic inflammation, it's serious and it's prolific. The World Health Organization ranks chronic disease as the greatest threat to human health. And there's metadata from the American Diabetic Association that 30 million people in the United States have diabetes, probably more now because that number is from back in 2015. It was the 7th leading cause of death at that time. The American Heart Association in 2017, cardiovascular disease, which is chronic inflammation of the cardiac system, accounts for about, I think it was 800,000 deaths in the United States, and 31% globally of all deaths. Those are huge numbers, all from chronic inflammation of the cardiac system. Allergies affect 50 million Americans a year. That's a chronic inflammation of the sinus system. Having a great time with ragweed today. Don't know about you guys. Arthritis and joint disease is a chronic inflammatory condition. That affects about 60 million people a year in the United States, and you'll often hear us discussing it in the office with our patients. One of our jobs is to figure out where there's joint inflammation and neural inflammation and reduce it. So you'll hear us talk about discs and inflammation there, but we're also talking about neurological inflammation. That's our kind of part in all of this. So in fact, we find across most healthcare that chronic inflammation is a major factor that affects people, but it also limits their progress in healing. So that's something that we try to catch with almost everybody. If you do know somebody that's suffering from what sounds like chronic joint inflammation, neurological inflammation, and they're just not getting the results that they expect with their healthcare, they feel like they're getting limited, let us know, because often chiropractors will catch inflammatory disorders just because we see people more often and we're able to assess them for it. If the person that you want checked out calls our office and mentions chronic inflammation or this Facebook Live, they can come in and get the full assessment, including x-rays, neurological assessment, physical assessment, and a review of findings with a doctor. It's normally $348, but if they mention this, then they can get it for $97. But when it goes to chronic inflammation, what's so important to remember is that it's not a cause, it's a response. So you have to figure out what's causing the chronic inflammation. And that's the part that's really dangerous. Some of you probably already know or have a suspicion that you're chronically inflamed. And it can be little things that you're noticing about yourself. Maybe you're kind of puffy, you've noticed some swelling, or when you eat, you're really swollen in your gut area. It's possible you've been watching your blood work change over the years. It's subtle, but it changes. It goes in a direction you and your doctor don't like very much. Maybe your blood sugar's high, you've noticed sleep is poor. All of those can be signs of chronic inflammation. Some of the ways we inflame ourselves aren't going to be too much of a surprise to you. You're probably expecting me to say them. Things like drinking alcohol, eating a lot of sugar, maybe you skip breakfast and somebody at work brought in donuts, so you grab a donut for breakfast. All of those are pretty predictable ways to create inflammation, especially if they're repetitive, right? You're doing more of a chronic thing to your body. But what about things that we don't think about as much, like stress? That's feels like it's event-based, but it's actually more of a long-term thing because it's not just an argument with your spouse or a difficult family member. It's starting your day with an alarm every day, staring at a screen. All of those things create a chronic inflammatory process in your brain, your eyes, your entire system. What about poor sleep or a challenged gut microbiome? All of those things create chronic inflammation. The thing I'm trying to get to here is that inflammatory processes are almost entirely environmental. You have a lot of control over it. So I want to try to empower you to pay attention to your environment and what could be inflaming you and modify what you need to or cut what you need to so that you're not suffering from inflammation long term. Again, the acute is okay, the long term is not. Sedentary lifestyle is a huge problem. That's hugely inflammatory. Americans already kind of had a problem with this. The Western world did generally, but then COVID just completely changed things. Like people are sitting all day, every day for work. That's just how they're getting through things. So sedentary lifestyle will lead to several things. It'll lead to muscle loss. So lean tissue loss in itself is an inflammatory process. Your body's breaking down muscle, processing it out. It's inflammatory as it does that. It'll also lead to insulin resistance. That's a whole other topic, a whole other cultural problem. If you want to know more about it, we have actually another Facebook Live that we had done on insulin resistance, and it's on our YouTube channel. So check that out if you want more information on that. Regular exercise is actually something that you can do that decreases inflammation, but exercise is a little bit tricky. You have to pay attention to the type that you're doing. So when you are doing high intensity exercise, that's good. So is walking. Things that are kind of low intensity steady state. They call them LISS exercises. If you are doing high intensity weightlifting, things like that, you can't do them for every workout because that will inflame your body. You can do them every 2 to 3 workouts. That's building lean tissue. So I know it sounds contradictory, but there's just ways for you to engineer your workout routine that is the least inflammatory possible. But overall, the message is get active because that will decrease your inflammation almost immediately. It's a very, very fast process when you start to remove the inflammatory things and add in the anti-inflammatory things. You'll see a big change really, really fast. I love walking pads for this. If you are stuck at a computer, you have no option. Try a walking pad or set an alarm with built-in brakes so that you get up and you move around, walk around the house, around outside. We're finally getting nice weather. Try to go out and walk a little bit. Again, stress, try to manage that as much as you can. I know there's going to be limits to that, but do what you can for it. But the big one that I really want to be talking to you about is in terms of chronic inflammation is our diet, what we're eating. And before I launch into this point, I want to highlight the issue of visceral fat. When we talk about fat in our body, typically what people are referring to is subcutaneous fat. It's the stuff that makes our clothes fit weird. We jiggle where we don't want to jiggle. Visceral fat is much deeper and much more dangerous. So visceral fat's a particular type of fat that lives around your organs. It's deep, deep in your torso. You don't even see it. you have to look for it with an MRI or with knowing that you're having a chronic inflammatory response. That's how you kind of know visceral fat exists. It's really dangerous because it essentially functions as an inflammatory organ. It also produces hormones. So you can see how if you are living with a lot of visceral fat in your body, you're chronically inflamed no matter what, because there's an organ, a thing in your body producing the chronic inflammation. Now, that is usually built from things like processed foods, over-processed foods. Any chronic issue you have is, if you like Google visceral fat and that chronic issue, there's going to be some sort of research link. And this comes from research by Dr. Sean O'Mara. It's really great work. He's actually doing MRIs on people and watching what changes their visceral fat levels, as in what reduces it. So the things that he's found are reducing alcohol, adding sprints into your workout. Do not get injured. Do them carefully or ease them in. Talk to your doctor about it. Saunas help, but the big thing is reducing processed foods. Now, when I say processed foods, I don't mean like you've cooked a meal with whole foods. I mean, like, these things have chemicals in them. You're shopping in the middle of the store. There's a list of ingredients you don't recognize. You want to be eating as much whole foods as you can. So shop the perimeter of the store, the outside. That's where most of the whole foods are. The foods that hurt are just the highly processed ones. The way we do processed foods in the Western world's pretty bad. We pump our foods full of things like high fructose corn syrup or thickeners that are made out of corn or soy, and all these high inflammatory things that are sneaky. You just don't even know that they're there. So you're kind of doing it to yourself, perhaps without even realizing it. About 60% of the diet in the United States is highly processed. 70% if you're a kid, which is alarming. Kids are having way too much inflammatory food in their diet, with, again, people just don't realize. So try to shoot for whole foods. The minute we eat it, it's inflammatory. It inflames our guts. And when our guts are inflamed, it's like a little germ in there. Like, our body sends inflammatory chemicals to try to isolate it and get rid of it. It will also change your microflora, your gut microbiome, which is a huge part of our immune system. About 60 or 70% of our immune system lives in our gut. So if you're affecting that with ultra processed foods, you're inflaming the gut, but you're also inflaming everything that leaves from the gut and goes into your body. So it's a big trickle down system. What to add? Like I said, shop the perimeter of the store. You want to be adding as many whole foods as you can with as few chemicals as you can. Read the labels. One example I like is if you go and get like a tomato sauce, sometimes you can compare the two jars. One has like 10, 15 ingredients and one is just tomatoes, water, salt. That's the one to opt for. Go for the one with the fewer ingredients. I'm not expecting you to make your own sauce. And I know that avoiding processed foods all the way is almost impossible, and it would be exhausting if you tried, but it's something to keep in mind to try to limit as much as you can. And you'll see a pretty big turnaround if you do that. Focus on your fiber intake. About 95% of Americans do not get enough fiber on a regular basis, and it's about 28 to 30 grams is the RDA, is what you should be getting per day. So take a look at what you're doing. I like food tracking for this. Kind of pay attention to what you're eating. There's apps like MyFitnessPal. Pay attention to what you're eating for a week or 2 weeks maybe, and just log what you've got and go back and look and see what your protein levels are and what your fiber levels are. You might be a little bit surprised, but the more fiber you get in there, the happier your gut microbiome and the less chronic inflammation you have in your gut and therefore your entire body. If you are chronically inflamed, add things like omega-3s. That's good for decreasing your inflammation overall. Things like polyphenols, so foods that have a lot of color, red onions, blueberries, olives are high in polyphenols. Add those in and that'll decrease your inflammation as well. Vitamin D is a big one. That helps a lot. We aren't getting a lot of it. We're inside a lot. It's perfectly fine to supplement it. Just watch your amount. And again, if you have questions, talk to your doctor about how much to supplement. But try to remember that chronic inflammation is systemic. It's not just one organ, although often one organ will give us the sign. So maybe you've noticed high blood pressure and you you have a family history of some sort of coronary issue, you're going to want to pay attention to cardiac function and inflammatory issues there, but you can assume that there's a chronic inflammation process going generally. So even just focusing on decreasing that will be like a systemically good thing to do for your body. As you eliminate all of this, you're going to need your neurology working well, because as that inflammation leaves your body, you have to retrain everything to work optimally, which your body wants to do. It's a natural process. So again, as a chiropractor, our job is to help identify where the chronic inflammation is and help your body get it out as you start to do these life changes. So if you know somebody who's chronically inflamed, they're just having issues getting over that hump to get into full health, let them know that there are other options besides, just continuing to live that way. So let them know if they want to get checked out and have their neurology examined a little bit more closely. Our office will do a full exam for them, including x-rays, neurological study, physical exam, and go over it with them, show them what's going on and how we can help. It's usually $348, but if they mention this Facebook Live, then they can get it for $97. And it's just a way to check up on their health, see how they're doing, and see how the chronic inflammation is impacting them and how to get it out of their body. If you have any more questions about this, how this shows up on blood work, how it might present symptomologically, anything like that, speak to one of your doctors, or you can leave a comment here. We check these, and let us know how we can help. We're more than happy to. Chronic inflammation is becoming something in the healthcare world that's being discussed more and more. It's something people kind of knew about, but we're starting to see the trickle-down effects of chronic inflammation in all systems of the body. So as you move forward in your health journey, it's something that to be very, very aware of. Changing that has huge positive repercussions for your health moving forward. All right. Thank you for tuning in for our talk on chronic inflammation. And if you tune in next month, Dr. Neblett's going to be going over stretching techniques as well. And that's another way to keep things moving in your body, particularly lymph, with the huge part of getting rid of your chronic inflammation. And he'll be able to give you some strategies there as well. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of your October.